Another short but really important session. So we've established the team sheet and we've got clear on what the roles, not the people, but the roles in the organisation are all about. Now, it's really interesting because when we go into a lot of organisations, I'll ask the MD, what does a great day look like for this person? And then I ask the person, what does a great day look like for you? How often do you think we get the same answer? The answer is not very often at all. So the point is, it's very difficult for people to take ownership if they're not actually laser focused on what they're there to do. So this session is really about creating laser focus. Once we've defined the team sheet, the organisational chart and the roles on that team sheet, then the next step is to write a positional contract for each of those roles. We can link this back to the fun skill matrix that I showed you in session 6. Essentially, there's an idea called the rule of 3. Now, I've tried this with hundreds of people in seminars and do it on keynote speeches as well. If I were to ask you, what's the number one thing that if you spent the majority of your time focused on it would have the biggest impact on your business? You'd come up with something. If I then said, and if you were to then focus on the number 2 thing and then the number 3 thing, you'd probably be able to write those things down fairly easily as well, hopefully. When I ask you for the number 4 thing, most people tend to struggle. The rule of 3 suggests that we can only ever really be focused on 3 main things. So actually, when we're writing a positional contract for a role, what are the top 3 things that each role should be focused on? Doesn't mean there can't be bullet points underneath it to expand on what that means, but they really only have 3 areas of focus maximum. Now, those 3 areas of focus are really, really important because it first of all defines what people should be focused on. If we link that to the idea of a default diary, they can now ring fence or build a wall around that time in their diary to make sure that those core activities happen. In other words, the rest of the stuff, the lower value activities, happen around the orange box items because those 3 core activities are really the orange box items for each role. The second thing is, once we've defined those 3 core activities, then we can start to think about how will we measure them. In other words, allocate some key performance indicators to each role. Now, for a salesperson, that may be conversion rate, it may be average sale, it may be margin, it may be all 3 of those. But the point is, each role in your organisation needs to have some very clear measurables so that they can self-evaluate. Remember, the fullback on the rugby pitch is responsible for evaluating what percentage of the time he catches the ball. What's his kicking accuracy and distance? He owns those KPIs. Doesn't mean that other people can't support him in developing them. That's why there's a coaching and training team. But overall, he's responsible for them because he understands that the better he is at each of those KPIs, the more he contributes to the effectiveness of that game. So the first thing to do for each of the roles on your newly crafted organisational chart is to define the 3 core responsibilities and then define the 3 to 5 KPIs that will form an objective measure of the effectiveness of the person doing that role. Once you've done that, it may be that you have people doing multiple roles. Therefore, you need to give them 2 positional contracts, maybe 3 positional contracts, and they need to sign all of them. They need to build their diaries around the orange boxes for each of those roles that you've given them. But remember, there may be some of those roles that are higher value than others. So those are the ones that absolutely need the orange boxes building around them first. If they run out of time, then it's time to hire the next level down on your organisational chart to support them. You don't necessarily need a higher value person to do what they're doing as well. You just need to take some of their lower value activities off them to give to a less expensive person. So these positional contracts will help you define what does a great day look like for each role in your organisation, and will help you then to define what are the performance indicators that each role should be measuring themselves against to evaluate whether they are or aren't having a great day. The benefit of that, of course, is that they start to make objective evaluations of their day rather than subjective evaluations of their day. The example I gave you earlier about my telemarketer who said she'd been really busy and made quite a lot of calls, who we then found out objectively had only actually made 34 on the first day, even though she thought she was busier than that. Key performance indicators remove the question of subjectivity and also help to identify how well people are performing. It's going to give you leverage too, because let's imagine you're measuring two people's conversion rates in your sales department and one person has a better conversion rate than the other. What are they doing differently? You should be able to leverage that conversion rate so that both people are performing similarly. So lots of leverage in the ability to ask better questions around the numbers that each role is turning out. This is going to give you far more structure and far more capability to actually manage in the organisation.